Pubs are still an important part of UK culture, and pub landlords have a responsibility to keep their customers and their staff safe. It's a demanding job as customers can have taken too much drink or other substances, and as we've all seen, they can get violent. In today's story from northwest England, the decision to bar a customer from a pub for bad behaviour, shockingly, saw the landlord murdered in front of his family in the most cowardly and dreadful act of revenge. Today's story begins at a pub just outside Widnes, the Hammer Pincers in Hough Green. The landlord of the pub for the last 16 years when we joined the story in the summer of 2019 was 49-year-old Christian Thornton. He was a kind and a good-humoured man who took his responsibilities as a landlord very seriously. He ran the pub with his wife Pamela and they had three children, for whom the pub was not just their livelihood, but it was also their home. The family had run the pub for 16 years and it had a good reputation. The pub was a nice one with a good set of customers and it wasn't known for trouble, although there were always one or two idiots, right? And Christian, he had to be very direct with them and on occasion bar them from the premises for the safety of other customers as well as the staff. One night in July 2019, a regular customer was causing a problem. This was 35-year-old Lee Abbott, an ex-kickboxer, who was behaving badly, and customers told Christian that Abbott had been bragging to them that he'd been carrying a knife. Christian didn't say anything to Abbott as he didn't want to escalate the situation, but as far as he was concerned, quite rightly, Abbott was now banned from his pub. A line had been crossed. Weeks later, on the 2nd of August, Abbott showed up again. So Christian told him very calmly that he was being barred from the pub. Again, he didn't give him a reason. He didn't want to antagonize him. Abbott was sober on this occasion, and he was reasonable. And he seemed to accept this ruling and even shook Christian's hand as he left. So everything seemed okay. But the day after, it was quite a different picture. Abbott came back aggressive. He was clearly drunk and volatile. He was demanding an explanation from Christian about just why he was no longer welcome. Christian again declined to provide one. Reasonable. But Abbott totally lost it. He shouted at staff behind the bar. He stuck two fingers up at the CCTV and he threatened to burn down the pub, which you recall that was where Christian and his wife lived with their three children. It wasn't a threat he could dismiss lightly, and he called the police. But the recording, as you will hear, suggests that he wasn't unduly worried. My name is Christian, as in the religion, Thornton, as in the chocolates, but no relation. He laughed as he spoke, before continuing. I have a pub. I asked him to leave last night. He left. He's come back this afternoon. I'm not 100% certain whether he's had a drink, but he's threatened to burn me down. I won't have a pub by the end of today. I've got children, a wife and a dog. I might swap the wife and dog around in their order. It depends. At the end of the call, the operator asked Christian if he thought that Abbott had been serious with his threats, to which Christian replied, I've always been under the impression that you always fear the quiet man, not the one who shouts his mouth off. The police popped to the pub late that night to see how Christian wanted to proceed. He told them he wasn't interested in escalating the matter to criminal charges, but he would appreciate them speaking to Abbott and asking him to steer clear of the pub. An eminently sensible approach, I would suggest, and one you would expect from a professional who wanted to diffuse the situation, but also still make it clear to Abbott that this was serious. At the regular meeting of the local pubwatch group on the 6th of August, Christian reported Abbott's behaviour to the other members, so he had a duty to do so. The group decided they would ban him from every pub in the group in the local area for 12 months. This was an official decision, and it was via the council that Abbott received this news via letter on the 9th of August. It was a normal Sunday afternoon a few weeks later, Sunday, August the 11th, when Christian was enjoying a darts practice session with other members of the darts team at the pub. It was mid-afternoon, just after 3:15 p.m., when Abbott came in. He didn't come through the main door but by the fire escape, which was adjacent to the darts area. When Christian clocked him, he made it clear again that he was barred from the pub and he pushed him outside. Bear in mind here that Christian wasn't a massive unit, but he was still 5'10" tall and a good 17 stone, so he wasn't the sort of guy you could easily push about. It was clear that Abbott was under the influence. He was on one. And the session had started the night before with wine and cocaine, before a trip to the supermarket that morning to keep the session in play. This time he bought a number of bottles of strong cider, and he quickly got through them before he headed to Christian's pub. Christian was very calm in the situation, putting his darts down and calling 999. As he did so, he showed Abbott the phone screen, so that there was no doubt exactly what he was doing, again trying to defuse the situation. This seemed to have the right impact on Abbott, who walked away. But then he stopped, he turned around, and he ran towards Christian at full speed. And when he was almost level with him, from his rucksack he brought out a massive kitchen knife. The next 52 seconds of dreadful violence was all covered on the pub CCTV cameras. Abbott stabbed Christian 11 times into his lungs and his heart. And then when Christian was doubled over, Abbott stabbed him deeply in the back, so much so that he caused a terrible open wound to his stomach. Somehow, Christian, despite his injuries, he was able to punch Abbott in the head, and this was enough for Abbott to run away from the scene. But what he left behind was a picture of absolute horror. As Christian lay in front of his wife and his 13-year-old son, his life ebbing away in front of them. And despite the best efforts of those at the pub and the emergency services, Christian Thornton died at the scene. He was just 49. Abbott ran off to a friend's house where he was quickly arrested just in boxer shorts. He'd washed and put out to dry his bloody clothes. He said, "I've done it. I'll admit everything. I attacked that Chris. Yeah, it's all me. It's all my fault, right? Yeah, I'll admit everything. I'm not going to deny nothing. That's the way it is. I'm guilty of everything you say. You don't need any evidence. I stabbed him." Detectives weren't surprised to see that Abbott had a considerable criminal record, including at the age of 17, when he was accused of attempted murder. Abbott had approached a man who had had some sort of scuffle with his brother earlier in the day. But as we know from what we've heard already, a fair fight isn't what a coward like Abbott wants. Instead, he was carrying a claw hammer, and he hit the man over the head with it a number of times, causing a compound fracture to the skull. He was lucky to survive this. Abbott received an 8-year detention order and was released, depressingly, after just 4 years. Interviewed about Christian's death in custody, Abbott was equally open about his actions as he was after his arrest, saying, "I'm as guilty as sin, I tell you, no issue at all." But sober the next day, he lied to officers that he was schizophrenic and being treated under the Mental Health Act. These lies, even a cursory check, showed that he wasn't telling the truth. When asked what he had been trying to achieve in the attack, he said, "Obviously I knew I was going to hurt him. I knew I was going to stab him. But he was very clear that murder was not his intent." And his initial leeriness and boldness and arrogance was entirely gone at the end of a second interview when he told officers, "I've took the bloody kid's dad away. Tell them I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to take him." But it's all words, right? You'd expect someone who professed to have these feelings to not put his victim's family and friends through the ordeal of a full trial, but not Abbott. At the trial, which took place in Liverpool Crown Court, Abbott pleaded not guilty to murder, admitting the lesser charge of manslaughter. Christian's wife Pamela sat through every day of the harrowing trial, listening to all the horrific details, and unfortunately, this was made even worse by the behaviour of Abbott. In front of his friends and family, I should add. A journalist at the Liverpool Echo newspaper briefly and very vividly and expertly explained what happened when Abbott spoke. Shifting his weight from foot to foot, waving his arms and repeatedly banging the lectern to drive home his point, Abbott moaned, "This is what I've had to live with for years." And then for several minutes without interruption, he ranted, he raved about the series of terrible events he said had made his life a living hell. The death of his dad due to medical negligence, a friend killed by police during a violent arrest, another pal mysteriously shot in the head, his wife nearly dying during childbirth with mother and baby left seriously ill, and on top of all that, being sexually abused by a gangster as a child. Finally, and thankfully, Abbott paused for breath and asked for a moment to compose himself. The stunned expressions on the faces of 12 jurors sitting opposite him across the courtroom told their own story. Then, talking about the murder, Abbott said that he felt vulnerable due to his past, and that's why he took the knife with him before jumping into a taxi to go to Christian's pub, which he described as a safe haven for him to have a quiet drink. He said that not knowing why he was barred was driving him insane, as he thought he hadn't done anything wrong. He said he just wanted to speak to Christian and ask him why he had taken the action. He reckoned that something snapped during his argument, as he was so out of it on cocaine and alcohol. But that certainly didn't match up with the evidence of the taxi driver who took him to the pub. He said he was talking to his estranged wife coherently on the phone, and he was very fluent as he told the driver about how angry he was about his pubwatch ban. When Christian showed Abbott he had called 999, Abbott reckoned this made him feel like his life was in danger from being shot by police officers as he was carrying a blade. Then, when pressed, Abbott told the court how the attack on Christian was I use his words, an act of desperation carried out by a madman. If that wasn't bad enough, you can only imagine how Christian's family must have felt as he continued that the murder, it was a cry for help. He added, "If I'd have had a gun, I'd have shot myself in the head. This was not down to me being a bad man. This was down to me needing help and being ill." Following the 9-day trial, the jury took less than an hour and 45 minutes to find Abbott guilty of murder. And despite all his emotional ranting earlier in the trial, on hearing the verdict, Abbott, he showed no emotion. Passing a sentence of life in prison with a minimum tariff of 28 years, the judge made the point that Abbott's evidence had been marked by narcissism, self-pity, and deceit. Christian's wife Pamela spoke about the effects of Christian's death on her and her family. Chris was an amazing person. He was very sociable, he was funny, kind, and would do anything for anyone. My family have lost a loving husband and father. Initially, when I was dealing with the loss of Chris, I felt like my life wasn't worth living, as the love of my life had been so cruelly taken from me. However, we have 3 wonderful children, and they are the reason I have to get up each morning and make it through the day. It breaks my heart to think that Chris will not be stood by my side at milestone events, such as the children's special birthdays, their marriages, and the birth of our grandchildren. So there we have it. So many lives ruined by under a minute of extreme violence. We've all seen someone like Abbott when they've been drunk or taking drugs. They're loud, aggressive, and you know, or you might have seen, that they're capable of violence in just the blink of an eye. What else could Christian have done? He did everything that a responsible pub landlord should do to protect his customers from a loose cannon like Abbott. How could he ever have known that Abbott could have reacted with such extreme violence? And now Abbott has thrown away his life behind bars in reality for the rest of his days, and Christian's family and friends have lost a great man. And for what? I'm Adam Lloyd. If you have found this video interesting, please do watch another one of my videos. Until next time.